Hello, hello, everybody. We are live. It sounded, I don't know if anyone heard that. It literally sounded like some sort of animal. Anyway, we are live. I'm going to wait a minute or two before we get started. This is our last episode of a five-part series, which I'm going to go into briefly in a minute, but welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's see. Minute or two before we get started. Oh, that's me. Just checking to see if my volume is up. Um, all right. We're just gonna get started. You know what I'm saying? I got my black ginger tea. It is so spicy. You know how sometimes with natural ginger, you can um you don't necessarily feel it as much unless you put like a lot of ginger in. But this one, you put a little drop, and I'm like, yo, that ginger is powerful. Powerful. Anyway, welcome to another live. I'm really excited to chat with y'all tonight. And I'm just looking in the chat, see who's in the room. Again, you might hear a bit of traffic. So we're still in Vietnam. We're here for another couple weeks, actually. Um, we're actually really liking Vietnam, but we do have a suitcase waiting in storage in Thailand, so we do have to go back at some point. Excuse me. We're actually working, looking for a place in Thailand, working with a realtor to see what we can find. Anywho, let's get going. So some of you might have done some inner work. And maybe you're at a place in your life where you've recognized your patterns, and based on that, you've learned how to make some decisions. Maybe you're rebuilding self-trust, and you still find yourself sometimes getting a bit distracted, scrolling instead of starting. And so today, hopefully, will change how you see distraction. But before we get started, YouTube tells me that almost 90% of you watching are brand new here. And I didn't know that. 90% is a lot. So that means that some of you have zero context for who I am or what this channel is about. So I'm just going to take a quick second to share a little bit about me. And I might be doing this every video just because that's a big number. So my name is Francis. I never say my name, I don't think, in these videos. I just kind of get right to it. That's just my rhythm. But my name is Francis. I'm a clinical therapist and a coach. And in my work with clients, I focus on helping self aware people break the cycle of fear, procrastination, starting but not finishing. And so we work on shifting the patterns that make it so hard to sustain change without pushing harder, overperforming, or forcing yourself into someone else's plan, because those are the things that I did: burnout, pushing harder, overperforming, uh, living my life through somebody else's idea of what happiness, success, all those things were, until I literally just gave it all up and bought a one way ticket to Thailand. And that was back in 2016. And I've been nomadic ever since. And I've been just sort of figuring life out and on a long term healing journey. And so I too have struggled deeply with a lot of the same things: the fears, the distractions, the procrastination, having a bunch of ideas, not moving forward with them, starting things, not finishing. And at some point, you kind of get fed up with a lot of that stuff. And I did, but it was in a different way. Grief. I had experienced a loss in 2016. My father had passed away unexpectedly, and just compounded things that kind of led me on this really wild ride for the last almost 10 years. And based on that experience, and also based on the work that I've experience with my own clients that I learned a few things, and I'm just here to share some of that stuff because I feel like if we're here, since we're here living this life, we might as well live it as full as we can and um, not waste those opportunities, right? And I hope that this channel gives you a lot of clarity and the next steps to be able to do that because we didn't come here, I don't believe, to not do the best that we can with all the things, right? I believe that we are more than capable and that we have all of the internal resources to live a life that is meaningful, live a life that is full of joy, aligned, and that feels good to us. I really believe that's possible. But we do have to get underneath all of the fears and all of the limiting beliefs that prevent us from actually connecting to who we truly are. So, if I landed in your algorithm, there's a good chance something in you is ready for a different conversation about change. And so, I want you to stay with me at least until the end because I'm going to walk you through the peace method. Just a simple way to break the cycle of distraction in real time. And again, if you're new here, type new in the chat. If you've been here earlier or earlier episodes, drop the number one, two, three, or four, any of the episodes that you watched, wherever you joined in along the journey. So thank you for being here. Of course, like, subscribe, share. It really helps people get connected to the channel. It seems like it's working. So I really appreciate that a lot that when you all just like and share or leave a little bit of comment or even send me an email letting me know how things are landing for you. It means a lot. All right. So again, if this is your first time here, this is the final episode in a five-part live series about what it's like when you sort of outgrown the life you're living and the domino effect that happens when that happens, right? After that sort of realization. And I see this with clients all the time. Many people that I work with, their life looks fine on paper, looks really good, right? All the boxes are checked, career, relationships, even plans, but inside something just doesn't feel right. Maybe there's a tightness, there's a heaviness, there could even be a restlessness. And I definitely can relate to that because I went through that. So it's that moment when the version of you who built this life is no longer the version of you who is actually living it. So you build this life and you're kind of now staring at a stranger like, who are you? Like these things don't even align anymore. These things don't even feel good anymore. And sometimes what we do is we try to go back to those things that used to feel good or we feel connected with, and they're not working. And so the invitation here is to explore something else and to be willing to see the misalignment that is happening in our lives. And so, what makes this series just a bit different from maybe a lot of the self development stuff that you might find, especially the self help industry, often assumes that you need to change the core of who you are. My mission is really to help you return to more of who you are or who you've always been underneath the conditioning, the self doubt, the fears, and any resistance patterns like procrastination, perfectionism, and overthinking. Um, Over these episodes, we've been exploring what it's like to be in that in between space when the old version of your life doesn't fit, but the new one isn't really clear yet, like it's still emerging. And we've looked at how to move through uncertainty, sit with some of the questions that are coming up, and notice sort of the subtle shifts that shape who you're becoming. And it's about learning to trust yourself again, even when a clear way forward feels far away or just feels kind of disconnected. And by the way, I feel like not a lot of people know that I have a free mini course that pairs with this series and actually pairs with this channel in general called How to Finally Get Unstuck Without Becoming Someone You're Not. And it kind of walks you through some of the exact shifts that I'm talking about today. So the link is pinned, it's going to be pinned in the chat, but it's in the description and you can grab it anytime during or after this live. And I also have a free quiz. So if you're not sure what your resistance style pattern is, and maybe you have an idea, that you could take. Everything's in the description below and actually gives you some details after once you know what it is. I'm not going to leave you hanging, and I'm going to give you opportunities to go deeper and give you a bit more clarity and always at least the next first step that you can take to begin sort of breaking that cycle. All right, let's run through let's recap some of the episodes that we discussed during our journey. And I realized I could have done this live yesterday. I got all torn up by the time zone. It's still happening. I'm like, yo, what day is it? What time is it? Who, what, where, when, why? I see clients every other week, and this week was client week. So it actually worked out because I like to come in fresh and new and ready to roll. So if I see clients back to back and then I do a live, I don't have as much energy and I really have to pay attention to my capacity. But anyway, if you're in the chat, let me know. But we started in episode one with recognition. And the title of that episode was You're Not Lost, You're Outgrowing the Life You Settled For. And that whole episode is like kind of what I talked about earlier. It's like waking up in a house you once loved, only to notice the ceilings feel a little bit lower, the room's a little smaller. And nothing's wrong with the house, right? You've just outgrown the walls that you built. And so in my work with clients, I hear this so often. Um, I hear someone will say, I feel guilty for wanting something different from the life that I've built, especially if like those are the things that you actually wanted, right? But then I have other clients who have this really powerful self belief, which hinders their growth. I had one client that said, in a way that always stayed with me, and I always think about it. And she said, I really believe that I'm fundamentally flawed, and maybe I'm just unable to change. And that always stuck with me because, like, imagine feeling that way, right? And I don't know if you feel that way or ever felt that way. I definitely felt that way in the past, especially when I was in my darkest days, going through the dark night of the soul. But I started to, as I've done this healing work, I started to make this connection. And so this statement to me, I feel like goes against the divinity within. And if divinity isn't language you connect with, think of it as your innate psychological, emotional wholeness. And so that's the part of you that is either wired for connection, curiosity, and growth before the fear, the limiting beliefs, and even maybe some of the self protection coping mechanisms that we developed over time before all of those began to take root. And so psychologically, this is called cognitive dissonance, where your environment no longer matches your evolving values and your nervous system sends discomfort signals to push you toward change. And so that discomfort isn't proof that you're fundamentally flawed. It's just proof that you're growing. Something in you is deepening. And that could be very scary, again, and very uncomfortable. But when we begin to welcome it, it really starts to shift our lives. So it's all about how we reframe how we see those changes taking place within us and, of course, externally. But keep that example in mind because in a few minutes, I'm going to show you how distraction kind of ties directly into moments like this. But if this is resonating, type grow in the chat, type it in the replay so that I know that this is your season as well. And so then we moved into episode two, where we talked all about decision making, why you still can't decide, and kind of like what it's costing you when you're in that state of indecision. And when you've outgrown your life, sometimes every decision feels kind of impossible. It's like trying to navigate with someone else's map because you spent so many years and so long using someone else's blueprint. So when you have this realization, every route feels uncertain because it's not drawn from your own inner compass. And so in my sessions, I see this when people make choices from borrowed beliefs, or borrowed values, I mean, their parents, their partners, or even society, right? And so the result of that, your nervous system gets kind of locked in place, right? Maybe the body tightens, the mind sort of gets stuck spinning, and hesitation takes over. and you find yourself stuck in that indecision state. And psychologically, this is just your brain recognizing that, well, making all these choices feels a bit risky, feels like a threat. And so once you understand how you naturally make decisions, and that can be hard because if you've been disconnected from your own inner knowing for a long time, you might not know what that natural rhythm is, right? And so once you understand, though, how you naturally make decisions, not how you think you should, those threat responses, they ease. And choice becomes a tool that you can use instead of a burden, right? Now, you can drop the side in the chat if decision making has been your sticking point lately. Let me know. And then in the third episode, in episode 3, the title of that one was Why You're Still Waiting for the Big Moment and What You're Missing. And we explored why people wait, even after they know what they want. I've definitely been in the waiting game for many years, and I gave a few examples in that episode. But it's like saving the perfect outfit for a special occasion while life is sort of happening all around you. And again, I've seen it in my own life, I see it in my clients' lives, waiting for the right time, the perfect opening, that guaranteed outcome where you can kind of like just swoop right in. And psychologically, this is delayed reward conditioning. Your brain learns to link satisfaction to later, which makes it harder to act now in the present moment. And so the idea here, if that's where you're at, isn't forcing yourself, it's giving yourself small doses of joy in the present so momentum can begin to feel safe again. And so, what's one thing that you've been saving for later? Share it in the chat and let me know. Maybe by you sharing, it could help connect uh, with the community. And it allows us to know that, okay, I'm not the only one thinking the same, feeling the same. And so when we share, we allow ourselves to just normalize the experience. And then in the last episode, episode 4, we talked about why you can't trust yourself and where it all began. Because everything has a beginning, right? And we trace that beginning not to get stuck in the past and stay there, because I don't think you necessarily need to know all the things from the beginning to allow yourself to move forward. But if you're able to connect some of the dots, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And that gives you permission to take the next step. So when we think about like where it all began, it's like you're standing in life and you're wearing glasses someone else prescribed years ago. And so the world feels blurry and you start doubting your own eyes. You start doubting what you actually see, not realizing that the lenses were never meant for you. So in my work with clients, we trace back to when they first learned to doubt themselves. Maybe when their feelings were dismissed or their needs were treated as inconvenient. And so when that happens, you start to literally override your own signals and rely on outside approval to know if you're okay, if things are okay, if this decision I'm making is okay. And so rebuilding self trust isn't about forcing yourself to do things. You see this theme? It's not about force, y'all. It's not about force. It's about learning to feel safe enough to listen to yourself again, to see what your internal compass is trying to tell you. And sometimes when we're in this state, we often overprotect ourselves from the fear of like getting disappointed. And so the thing about this is when you let yourself be overprotected, it keeps you stunted and stagnant. But what you can do is just welcome it as feedback. Like all of this stuff is just feedback. And sometimes it's hard to transition to that, but it really is. It's you welcome it as feedback, as data showing you where you still need safety. Because someone who feels safe and secure makes decisions quite easily, even if they're hard, is able to take risks. And so we want that safety and security. We have to build that foundation though. And so that's when it becomes something you can use to grow instead of something you have to fight. And trust is going to be a key. Trust is going to be key for what we talk about next, because distraction shows up loudest when trust is low. When you're not trusting yourself, when you're not trusting what's happening in the environment, um, it makes it hard, right, to make the next step. So type trust if this is the piece you know you need to strengthen for yourself. Let's check in the chat. What's going on, Kenya? It's good to see you. Drink some tea. All right, let's get into the episode. Hopefully, that recap gave you enough so that you can actually make connect the dots. And if not, go back and watch some of the episodes. So here's what I keep seeing in my work with clients. They do beautiful work. They recognize their patterns again, but they find themselves getting distracted, especially when they're connected to something that truly matters to them. And suddenly they find themselves scrolling, procrastinating, or bury themselves in busy work, working on stuff that's like unrelated to the thing, right? And so they think there's something wrong with them. They get stuck in that shame and blame spiral. Sure, some of you might be aware of that. But I tell them your distraction isn't a reflection of your worth or your character. It doesn't mean you're lazy or bad or undisciplined. We learned that in school, right? School did a really great job teaching us things that are having an adverse effect now in our adult lives. And so when we look at distraction in this sense, it's like a guard dog barking at the wrong door. You think it's blocking you, but it's trying to shield you from something it learned to expect. And so by the end of this episode, you'll see distraction for what it really is, and you'll know how to welcome it again as feedback. You work with it instead of against it, and you turn it into a guide instead of a barrier. All right, so let's just slow it down for a second because I want you to really notice this pattern in your own life. um, we're not all immune to distractions. Even I get distracted. The world is built to pull your attention away from what matters, including you, which is the most important part of this equation. And here's what I've seen over and over again. Again, distractions get the loudest right before you're about to do something big, whether it's a big change, a big decision, something aligned, something that really, really matters. And your brain starts offering you urgent reasons to maybe check the email. And your body suddenly remembers, like, oh, I got to go do laundry. And your hand reaches for your phone without you even realizing it. Like, we've literally been conditioned. So you could see how hard it could be to break this, but the possibility is there. But maybe you wanted to create a community, but the idea has been sitting in a notebook for years. Maybe you're halfway through writing your book, but it's been untouched for months. Maybe you've replaced meaningful work with, again, busy work because you know that if you touched the real task, it would become actually real to you. And that terrifies you. Or maybe it's something simpler, but just as telling, like finally signing up for the class that you keep researching, or or sending the application that you've written 10 times. Instead, you find yourself deep in a rabbit hole of something, organizing old photos or watching just one more video. And so here's the hidden cost of all that. It's not just time you're losing, it's trust. Trust in your own follow through, trust in your own voice, trust in a part of you that says, I can do this. And so you start avoiding your own reflection, not because of how you look, but because of the promises you keep breaking to yourself. And so in my work with clients, distraction almost always peaks when they're closer than they think, when the path is beginning to be very clear, when the work is starting to flow. That's when it shows up the strongest, which tells me distraction isn't here to destroy your life bit by bit. It's here to keep you in familiar territory that it believes is safe. And so the advice that we've been told about dealing with distraction, that's where a lot of people get stuck, even for myself. Whenever I've talked with people about feeling more distracted, I hear the same things. Maybe you have too. And I've definitely recommended them myself, so I'm guilty of it. You think about turning off your notifications, maybe make a better schedule, time block, all those things, just focused harder, right? Sometimes it's productivity advice. Other times it's self-help, recycled language. Just set your mind to it, visualize the end results, right? You just have to want it bad enough. And again, I've tried it all. And for a short time, it can help, right? But here's the truth. None of it gets to the real reason you're getting distracted in the first place. And so when we understand that distraction has a purpose, it changes the game. And when you understand that purpose, you end up treating it um, you end up treating it not like a problem to eliminate, right? But if we don't understand that, you're going to find yourself pushing harder. You're going to force more structure. And every time you do, there's a part of you that digs in deeper. And there's a part of you that's going to rebel against that. And I actually was talking to a client yesterday, and was yesterday? Yeah, yesterday. And she was talking about how like all the things like what makes her feel good and nourished is having a structure, working out, eating the foods that make her feel good, but for whatever reason she is fighting against that, she's rebelling against that and not doing it. And that's because something deeper is happening, right? It's not more structure, more rigidity that's going to help the follow through or help you sustain some of these changes. It's something else. And when you continuously force yourself like that, it almost feels like you're at war with yourself. Maybe you wake up in the morning already strategizing how to beat some of the distractions. And by the end of the day, you've lost twice. Once because you didn't do what mattered the most. So you feel bad about that. Right. And then again, because you've lost trust in yourself, like I mentioned earlier. So I've seen this inner battle with my clients strengthen over time until it feels like you're living two competing agendas in your head, right? One part of you wants to move forward, the other is convinced moving forward just isn't safe. And so the more you fight it, the more you lose ground. And then you kind of get stuck in that cycle, and that cycle can last a long time, sometimes years. And so here's the part that's really important to pay attention to. You can see you can already see like distraction isn't something you have to overpower, right? When you push harder against it without understanding it, without listening to what it's trying to tell you, it doesn't disappear. It finds other ways to stop you. Sometimes it gets really creative, right? And you end up slipping back into old habits you thought you'd outgrown. And this part is tricky because it's not just your mind at work, it's your body. Your body often senses the risk of change before your mind can actually explain it or make sense of it. So it steers you toward what's familiar, safe territory, even if that territory is full of things you don't actually care about, things that you're not really connected to. So instead of fighting that part of you, here's what I want you to try. And this is exactly the kind of reframe I go deeper in my free mini course. Links in the description if you want to explore it after we finish here. It's really short too. It's like four lessons, but it's really powerful and deep. So let's consider a powerful reframe and how you approach the distractions in your life so that you can get yourself out of that repetitive cycle. And so this is the shift. I really want you to consider this and all the things that you might struggle with, like a relationship. And with all relationships, we want to get curious. Think about distraction as a relationship that you can actually learn from. And again, with all relationships, the most powerful starting point is curiosity, which means instead of spiraling into the blame and shame game and thinking that something is wrong, what if we invite distraction into a conversation and ask, if distraction was trying to keep me safe, what is it trying to keep me safe from? And some people say, I hear this a lot, oh, it's a lot easier said than done. Of course it is. This is conditioning that you've been participating in for a very long time, and it's rooted in deep experiences. But there's always a window of opportunity. And in that window of opportunity, that's where you are guided into looking at something differently. And that window is very small and it's short. But when you do that often enough, it grows. It gets longer, it gets bigger, it gets wider. And and you can use that to shift things, shift how you see things. And so when we ask the question, I'll say it again, if distraction was trying to keep me safe, what is it trying to keep me safe from? Maybe distraction is guarding a younger part of yourself that tried and experienced rejection in some shape or form. Or wanting something so much that it resulted in some kind of pain or loss. And so you remember that. And each time you inch closer, that memory subconsciously shows up to protect you from re experiencing it. The body and the mind are so intelligent. They're too smart for their own good. And they're going to protect us by any means necessary. And so we have to get involved on a conscious level to tell it a different story. And so your invitation here is again curiosity and taking a non judgmental stance when trying to understand what your distraction is trying to show you. So instead of asking why it's there or getting upset with it or upset with yourself, you get information that can help you to move forward without pushing or burning yourself out. So you go from suppression, which is ultimately another form of distraction, to awareness, bringing everything to the surface so you can see it clearly for what it is. I always remember this Brené Brown quote, and maybe you've heard me say this before, or maybe you've seen it on social media, but she said, holding your shadows in front of you, she said, hold your shadows in front of you because they could only take you down from behind. And so that shadow, when you can, when you can't call it what it is, will keep you in the darkness. Hence why there's this stuck feeling and why you might be caught in the spin cycle. And I've seen this play out in very small ways, small everyday ways. I remember a client who wanted to leave her family business because of a complicated relationship with her parents. But she resisted making that decision because it was all that she had ever known. Instead of facing that choice, she took on more and more responsibilities in the company. And even though she was completely burnt out, the truth was she was avoiding the idea of stepping out into sort of the real world on her own because she had never done anything else. And so her burnout became a way to avoid the truth of how much fear she felt about leaving, even though she was struggling with chronic stress, chronic fatigue. And so it wasn't just about the distraction itself, though she really judged herself pretty badly for it. But she was in a tight spot. She had kids to take care of, so she just couldn't just walk away, right? It was something that if she were to do, it'd have to be planned pretty meticulously in a way that didn't impact her livelihood. And so we worked on creating more breathing room, reducing the burnout, and getting clear on what those distractions were really protecting her from. And over time, she learned to stop using distraction as as a shield and instead place stronger boundaries where um, she needed the most, right? And sometimes that's what we need. We need more boundaries, boundaries with ourselves, right? That's how we build self trust. And when we have boundaries with ourselves, we're then able to create external boundaries that create an insulation that allows us to be consistent, that allows us to not get pulled into some of those distractions. By the way, if this is already making you think differently about your own patterns, you can take the free What is Your Resistance Style quiz, which not only gives you patterns, but gives you ideas on how to disrupt those patterns really quickly. And it's free. It's in the link is in the description. So, what about you? Can you think of a time when distraction might have been protecting you from something bigger? Okay. Think about that. Now, I know that some of this might sound backwards. I'm telling you to stop fighting distraction, and you might be thinking, if I do that, won't I just end up avoiding the important stuff even more? I actually had a client this week, and I was telling her to think more. Not think more. I was telling her to go through sort of this self inquiry when she was feeling a certain way. And she said, well, I'm already an overthinker. Should I even be thinking more? And it wasn't necessarily about thinking, it was about feeling. Sure, there was a question that created a thought, but it was about feeling more. So that's very much a valid concern, whether or not, like, if I stop this, if I stop fighting distraction, am I just going to get lost in distraction? Right. Uh, because part of this approach is letting go of a little control, and that can feel very risky. But we can also agree that ignoring it hasn't worked either. So something has to give, right? And so here's the shift. Allowing distraction isn't about giving it free reign. It's about stepping into the role of an observer, almost like a scientist. You're not surrendering to distraction for days on end. You're approaching it with intention and awareness, noticing what it's doing and why it's showing up. I often tell clients, just say to yourself, oh, here I am again, distracting myself. Let me be honest, what's really happening here? And when I do this in my own life, I've noticed patterns over time. Sometimes I just need an energetic reset. Sometimes I just need a break. I need to step away from the thing and then come back. And sometimes what I'm working on is just completely out of alignment altogether. And so if I'm not listening to that, then I'm just going to be continuing to work on something that doesn't really matter to me, right? And so in a second, I'm going to give you a simple acronym that you can use anytime you catch yourself in distraction so it's easy to remember even in the moment. It works. But distraction can take many forms, like we talked about. Busy work, like deep cleaning or organizing, escapes, like scrolling or binge watching Netflix, or over helping others is a big one. Over helping others because it feels safer than focusing on yourself. I have a lot of clients that do that. And so, your first step in all of this distraction cycle is simply to audit your own patterns. Spend 1 week noticing what you reach for when you're feeling overwhelmed or when you are in indecision, um, when you don't want to do the thing in front of you. Just notice and don't try to change anything yet. Just gather data. A lot of the times we go right into problem solving and we're just not there yet. And that's okay. And so then ask yourself, what's the feeling underneath my resistance to this task, to this thing? And that's where the real work begins. Because once you can name what's happening underneath, you're no longer just reacting to the thing. You're in a position to respond with a bit more clarity and choice. Okay. Um, well, something else I was going to say, and I think it just slipped my mind. Oh, yeah. So, what I find is that a lot of clients, I mentioned just a second ago, like we go right into problem solving because we want to fix it so quickly so we don't feel it, right? And we're really good in different ways at solving problems. And what I mean by that is that we're good at going to the next thing and the next thing and figuring out another thing. But what we need more assistance in, and what we need to develop more is awareness, the ability to just notice. And sometimes we can be in that stage for a while. But the more that you're able to just notice and deepen your self awareness on a physical level, even just kind of like noticing your thoughts and not just getting swept up in them, that is so much of the work before you start making any decisions, problem solving, strategizing. It's the noticing, it's the observing. Okay. All right. So now that you can see distraction as something to explore rather than something to fight, let's make it all practical because you're like, okay, that sounds great, but like, how do I actually do it? Like, what does it look like practically if I'm in it, right? And so I got you. All right. So in the moment when you catch yourself in the loop, you need something simple that you can do right then without like overhauling everything, right? Let me get a little sip here. Oof, tell you that taste. All right. All right. Something simple that you can do when you find yourself in this state. So I developed this acronym called PEACE. This is where peace comes in. It's just a quick way to remember how to shift from spiraling into distraction to moving forward with a bit of clarity and choice. All right, so the P stands for pause. When you catch yourself in the act, stop whatever you're doing for just a moment, that small window, so you can break the autopilot cycle before it runs away with you. Okay? And after you pause, you want to do the E. You want to exhale and feel. You just take one slow, intentional breath and just notice what's happening in your body. Do you feel tight in your chest and your shoulders, like something going on in your stomach? And so this step helps you drop into awareness instead of judgment. One of my clients this week, her biggest task, part of her homework, I give homework, is when she gets up in the morning, you take one breath before you get out of bed. That helps to reset the nervous system. And that's a scientific fact. Before you start anything, you take a breath. Even in between, like when you transition, you take a breath, one breath. That really does drop you in. It anchors you and it disrupts the flow. And then the A letter in peace is ask with curiosity. Like we mentioned earlier, ask, what might this be trying to keep me safe from right now? So you're not interrogating, you're exploring. Not like, what's wrong with you? Why do I keep getting distracted? Like, why is this happening now? Like, those kinds of answers don't, I mean, those kinds of questions don't give you answers that you are useful. So we want answers or questions that are going to be useful for us. So we're just exploring, okay? We're not interrogating. And then the C in the peace acronym is checking in. We're listening for what comes up. Maybe it's fear, maybe it's a memory that's associated with this feeling or this task, or maybe it just feels too much right now. Maybe you're just overwhelmed. So let whatever shows up as information, not like the final verdict. Okay. And then the last letter in the peace acronym is ease. We're going to ease in. You want to offer yourself reassurance because sometimes after we interrogate ourselves, we saw these bad, terrible things about ourselves, we punish ourselves, right? We need in that time reassurance that says, hey, I can take one small step and still be safe. Even if you don't necessarily believe it yet. But just saying those words is a different vibration, it's a different frequency that is entering your body. And then once you say that, you want to do the tiniest next step that matters. So tiny that it's laughable, that it feels stupid. It feels like, yo, if I do this, ain't nothing gonna change. I want you to do that. So maybe it's sending an email, opening a document, writing one sentence. My client came in this week and was like, showing me her journal. And she was like, look, I wrote one sentence. And I was like, that's great. We put way too many expectations on ourselves, especially when we don't have the capacity to hold those expectations. So there's nothing wrong with bringing it back to the basics and keeping it as simple as possible. You've heard the phrase simple, stupid, right? And so when you practice peace, you're not trying to force your way through distraction. You're literally breaking the cycle by creating safety and choice in the moment. Because sometimes when we're stuck in those cycles, we feel as if we don't have a choice. Like we don't, we're just stuck. And so um, that's when, um, so this helps you to respond differently over time. And the habit of distraction starts to loosen its hold on you. It works. But we try to rush through things because we want the result, but not the process. And with the process, the results take care of themselves. We don't have to meddle in the result, but we do need to focus on the process, the journey. Hope that makes sense. And drop the word peace in chat so I know you've got it. In the replay, drop the word peace and let me know if that makes sense to you. And I'll leave the acronym in the description. I didn't put it in, but I'll leave it in the description so that you can copy and paste it. Or I'll pin it to the comment. All right, so let's wrap this up. If you stayed with me until the end, I see your commitment to this work, and I'm really proud of you for showing up for yourself in this way, even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient, because this is a Friday night. It's 8:30 on a Friday night. Y'all could be out there, I don't know, doing something a lot more fun. I don't know what people do on Friday nights these days. You know, I'm 40 plus, so my Friday nights look a lot different these days. But yeah, I just want to acknowledge that that's something that you're choosing yourself in real time by being here. So distraction isn't the end. Sometimes we're like, oh, I'm just feel like I'm just gonna always be distracted, and this is for my so-called ADHD folks. It's not the case. We just gotta learn your own rhythm, and you just gotta work with that rhythm. You gotta discover your own rhythm. You gotta create your own rhythm, and that's what's gonna sort of lead you through that momentum and through the things that you actually want to create, all the things in your life that you want to step into. And so distraction isn't like the end all be all, right? It's just pointing you towards something that's out of alignment maybe some sort of overwhelm. And so the resistance you feel to doing the thing is simply information. You don't have to meet it with force or push yourself into burning out to figure this stuff out. Instead, you just listen. You pay attention to every part of yourself that's asking for your awareness. That's all it's asking for. And then you work with the current rather than against it. And so this is the work of self leadership, not by overpowering yourself, not by rigid rules, but by honoring every part of you that's just been trying to keep you safe all along. So here's a question I'm going to leave you with. If your distractions were guiding you towards the next thing that you needed to heal, what would they be pointing to right now? And sit with that, right? And if you feel like sharing, I'd love to hear your answer in the comments after the live. I'll read every comment that gets, um, how do you say it? Every comment that gets placed there, or you can send me an email. And if you want to explore this at your own pace, my free mini course, How to Finally Get Unstuck Without Becoming Someone You're Not, was intentionally created for moments like these. And if you're ready for deeper long term change, join me in the Resistance Reset, an 8-week program starting January 2026. I have pushed that back to January. And it's designed to help you break some of these cycles and build trust without letting old fears dictate your life. And we do this in community. And early bonuses are available for now for those who know they're ready to step into something new. And so there's a link in the description for that. But I know that this series had a lot in it. It's 5 episodes. And so I'm going to take a little short reset before diving into the next videos. And I want to make sure what comes next really does serve you. And I'm even considering maybe some shorter ones, more focused topics. So if there's something you want me to cover that would help you most right now, let me know. Tell me in the comments or send me an email. I didn't say like and subscribe. Maybe I did in the beginning. I don't remember. But as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for being here on a Friday night. I really appreciate it. And like and subscribe and share this video with someone who's caught in distraction and could benefit from this message. And as always, I will see you on the other side of change. Thank you for being here.